Yes! What is up, everybody? And welcome to U.S. Men's National Team time. Ultimately, that's what we're getting into. Because in less than a year's time, a World Cup will kick off in Qatar. And if things go to plan, the U.S. Men's National Team should be one of those 32 teams competing in the competition. I hope that I'm not jinxing it. A lot can change between now and then, of course. And that is next November. So today, what we really want to focus on, I'm talking about me, Jimmy Conrad, and Heath Pearce, is what systemic and squad changes we want to see from Gregg Berhalter and all the boys, and what they might need to do over the next 364 days. We have a lot to get into today, so we're glad that you're here with us. Qué Golazo, U.S. Men's National Team Hour begins right now. All right, everybody. Heath Pearce, Jimmy Conrad alongside with you. Heath, you're looking fantastic as always. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, I just want your take on this. I actually combed my hair the other direction today, and I'm kind of liking the vibe of it right now. Mostly because if I do it the other way, it makes it look like I need a haircut. But wanted to get your take on it because you're a man who prides himself in a good haircut. But that's not what we're here for. I'm excited about the hour. And by the way, the thing that I'm most excited about this Mondays is how much people get involved in the conversation. It's my favorite
100%.
show because obviously national
100%.
team, it's super relevant, but people chuck their comments at us, inspire some really good conversations. That means that our producer Des has to tell us, hey, come back to the script, don't stay out there too long. But yeah, man, how you doing?
I'm good. I want to swim in these warm waters of everybody's comments. So make sure after you hit like and subscribe, leave us some comments. And if they're very, very good, Des will throw them up on the screen. And if they're even better than good, then we'll probably read and answer them. But we want to hear a lot of and see a lot of your questions. So make sure that happens. Also, you got to make sure to check out our full Champions League Match Day 5 preview. I shot that today. It's one of our podcasts, Qué Golazo. Go find it on wherever you get your audio stuff. It's on YouTube as well. And it is a big preview of all the games that are happening on Tuesday and Wednesday in the Champions League. And if you're more visually inclined, of course, as I mentioned, you could go to YouTube to make that happen. Just want to throw that out there. So, Heath, to answer your question, I'm doing great. And I'm excited about this U.S. Men's National Team Hour, our little special time to talk about the U.S. Men's National Team, because it's sometimes I feel like we get lost in the clutter of everything that's happening in the top stories. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer getting fired. Who's going to take over? You know what? Who cares for an hour? Let's talk about the U.S. Men's National Team, okay? Let's get into this a little bit. Christian Pulisic scored for Chelsea this past weekend against Leicester City. Tuchel came out, his manager, Thomas Tuchel, and apparently we just had an interview with him, so be on the lookout for that with James Bench. But what I'll say is Tuchel was so impressed with the way that Pulisic came into the team and just was decisive. Like, he finishes plays. You and I, or you talk about it more than I do, but like finishing what you start on attacks and bringing attacks to completion, as I think is the right phrase.
Conclusion.
And conclusion, excuse me. And Christian Pulisic does that to an extent that Thomas Tuchel wants all of his players to play just like that. And I thought that was a really high compliment. And then obviously Xavi coming out from Barcelona and saying he's a fan of Christian Pulisic is something I would be like, yeah, I wish I had a coach talking to me about that. So let's use Christian Pulisic as a way to kind of segue into this bigger topic of what do you want to see in the next 364 days from the team. I assume that's Christian Pulisic starting and thriving for the U.S. Men's National Team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I look holistically at this national team, the thing that I was always fearful most of in previous cycles was, man, there are 2 or 3 players we have to have, or we have no chance of qualifying or doing well in a World Cup. Christian Pulisic is one of those players, but I'm not panicking because we've gotten used to having to play without him a few times over the last year in terms of injuries and things like that. Obviously, he's a leader. He's a game changer. He does all the things. He's a world-class player. Like, it's that simple. He's a world-class player, and he's still young, and he's leading this team. But when I think about this team as a whole, and you take Christian Pulisic out of there, it's probably the only player that worries me if we don't have him. Yes, there's Reyna, but we haven't seen enough of him yet. And the team's still continuing to get results at the national team level. Or we're seeing players develop, whether it's Brenden Aaronson or others. I'm really excited about the depth of this team. So when I look a year out from now, not only am I thinking about who from the 34 players that have been capped in this cycle by Gregg Berhalter, I think it's 34, around maybe 33 to 35 players have been capped during this World Cup cycle in this final round, who won't make it. And then on top of that, of the players that we think right now, if it was selected today, won't make it in a year from now because we have more players up and coming. And I'm talking about Cade Cowell, Caden Clark, a number of these ones that we all make fun of because of their generation of names that they've all been named: Cade, Jade, Fade, Lade. like all these guys that have the new modern names of just how difficult it's going to be in 12 months time. Obviously we're talking about a year out and we're going into winter. It's going to be the first Winter World Cup. I guess not Winter World Cup. It's the first end of year World Cup, because technically there's, I think, some summers that are winters in certain locations, but like in terms of the time of the year. So, that's the thing that I'm thinking about now is one, how do you cut that 34 down to 23? How do you cut that 23 down to an 11? And then the influx of new players. We talk about Joe Scally. We talk about Ricardo, Pepi. None of these guys were part of the conversation 6 months ago, and now they've forced themselves into it. And Jorge Castillo saying Heath going full Central Valley with that flow of hair. Big shout out, Jorge, to the Central Valley.
You know what, Kevin gave you a 9 as well, so
really?
You got 2 compliments coming your way.
Nice, dude. I'm glad I'm testing this out, and I like the way that it's being received.
There's definitely a flow. There's definitely a vibe to it that has its own personality, and I have a lot of time for your hair right now. I think what's interesting, I was part of 2 World Cup qualifying cycles, and in 2006 we beat Mexico in Columbus 2-0. I didn't
hold on, Jimmy, before you finish that thought. Des, timestamp that humble brag from Jimmy real quick. It was 6 minutes and 2 seconds in.
I think it's important for context.
No,
context.
I appreciate. I just want Des to timestamp that just so we have it.
Come on, it's context.
Okay,
Mr.
sorry.
Can everybody rate my hair because it looks so great today?
All right,
okay,
get back to it, Jimmy. Don't distract us.
What I'm saying is that when we were in Columbus,
Yep.
Steve Ralston scored the game-winning goal, or maybe it was DeMarcus Beasley. Either way, Steve Ralston scored there was 2 zeros. Beasley and Ralston scored. I was on the bench, didn't get in. That's fine. That was the famous stare down from Gooch and Jared Borghetti, right? That's the famous photo from that game. And Steve Ralston didn't make the team, but he helped the team qualify for the World Cup. Now, fast forward to 2010, Connor Casey scored 2 goals against Honduras and San Pedro Sula to help us qualify for the 2010 World Cup. He didn't make the team either. Yeah. So we could actually be talking about guys that are contributing in a meaningful way that won't make the team next year.
Yeah.
And that is mind-blowing.
Do you want me to give you some?
To me. What's that?
You want me to give you some names that I think?
Well, I'm sure.
Finish the story, but yeah.
I assume that you're one of them. I wasn't one of the last cuts, but I was close to the last cuts for 2010. I didn't deserve it. I wasn't playing very well. I
was part of the 7 of the last camp, 30 cut down to 23. I was the most capped player in 2008 when we started the qualifying cycle. I played a bunch in 2009. I was part of the Confederation.
Des, can we get a timer on this? This sounds like
part of the Gold Cup team as well. That had a sad ending, but a good run up to that point. That was a mixed squad, mostly a B and a C team. But I was in the team, so I was one of the only 2 players. I think it was 2 of us that went from Confederations Cup to that. So I was very much part of it. And obviously, it didn't sink in at the time when I was let go from that camp. But I remember getting the handshake and realizing that I was going to be. And Bob said it. You were an important part of this cycle and a huge part of qualifying for this World Cup. Unfortunately, we've got another decision because 23 players. And Jimmy, I want your take on building a roster, okay? And then I'll talk about some guys from the.
Wait. Before you get there, I just want to state for the record that I think it's bullshit that any national team coach brings in 30 guys. Like, you should have your 23 set at that point. When you're going to name a team, you've had plenty of time to see these players. And for you to bring in 30 just to break the hearts of 7 guys, I think is inhumane, and I think it's bullshit. And I just want to state that for the record. Continue your story.
I do think it wasn't great. It wasn't ideal. The way it actually happened, when we had to keep our phones on us till midnight to be told, and it was well past midnight it was almost 1 when we found out. So you're left in this really tough place, which leads me to believe that there maybe was some deliberation about a couple players, but 30 is a lot. And the only player that was potentially injured was Gooch, to see how fit he was. Oguchi Onyewu coming back from an injury at that point. I don't even think he was fit at the World Cup, but that's a different story.
No, he wasn't.
But they hedged their bets that he was going to be good by then. But he was the only one that was really on the fence. I think the rest were all there. But Jimmy, let's talk about building a roster in general, right? You get 23 players. We've used 34 players in this qualifying cycle so far. You get 23, and 3 of them are goalkeepers. So you get 20. Am I right?
20. Okay. That's right. That's good math.
Thank you. It's in real time. You know what I mean? I don't have my TI 93 in front of me right now. But you're going with 23 players. You're the manager. Are you going 2 in a position? Because at 20 players, you're at 2 a position. Or, and this is my theory of why I feel like I would have made a World Cup a couple years later if it was the same time, because I had played more positions. I started playing center back next to you before you had the unfortunate forceful retirement. But I wasn't enough of a resource to the team as a left fullback going into the 2010 World Cup, because if you got Johnny Bornstein, who Bob drafted, Bob brought up, great player, made the team. You've got your left back.
Johnny boy.
Yeah, Johnny boy. That just brought back memories. But like after that, you've now got DeMarcus Beasley, who started to play a little bit of left back. You've got Carlos Bocanegra, who had played a little bit of left back. So now you've got cover in a pinch or a bind. And now you're able to start building players into your midfield or attacking players, right? In theory, and this is the way I interpreted it as, we had Edson Buttle, we had Hercules Gomez, we had Robbie Finley, all these guys that were in peak form going into that, right? Weren't part of the qualifying cycle, weren't part of the national team going into that, but were peak scoring strikers, Golden Boot winners, challenging, doing really, really well, make the World Cup team. Not part of anything leading up to that, because if you're a coach, you want to be able to, I mean, it's a bad example, but the Belgium game, in theory, you put Wando in and he finishes that because you have this gut instinct of put in my natural goal scorer and he finishes. How do you build your roster? Are you going to in a position traditionally, or I'm
building my roster. I'm writing this down as we speak because, yes, I find this whole process fairly interesting because I think there are a few tweeners that could help us. Like Joe Scally can play on the right or the left, assuming that.
Okay, let me ask you this then, real quick.
Serginho Dest can play winger. He can also play right back. He can also play, kind of a wing back as well, right? He can do all three of those positions and help us. Maybe not defensively as a out and out outside back. Different conversation. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I guess my question to that is if you're building two players, how many players from your World Cup cycle, 2006, you went to the World Cup, 23 players were selected. How many of those players were used in the World Cup? Do you remember? I mean, you guys used most, right?
We used Berhalter didn't play. Chingy didn't play. Josh Wolf played 20 minutes. Ben Olsen wouldn't have played if Claudio Reyna didn't get hurt.
Yeah, but still played, right? So
still played.
Would you say
I think Chris 20? Albright didn't play. There was probably, I think, 4 or 5 guys. So you had two goalkeepers didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Berhalter, Ching, Albright. So you have probably 5, maybe I'm missing one. So 5 or 6 guys that didn't play. Right. Okay. So you have,
so you had, say you had 18, your two goalkeepers.
18. Yeah. 17 or 18 guys that you actually used. Because
so you're looking at your roster.
Played, Mastriani played. Yeah, all those guys played. So I would say probably 18 guys were used during the tournament.
Yeah. Okay. So then tell me how you where are you risking your lean? Where are you going lean and taking the risk that you won't have to call upon a second of that position of that level in order to build your roster? Because again, I interrupted you, but you were talking about Joe Scally. That versatility in itself is really valuable when you're building a roster. If that means you can bring less traditional defenders or players in those positions.
It's a good question. I mean, I almost go lean in the midfield. I think we're all kind of set, everybody, right? Everybody watching, everybody listening on McKennie, Musa, and Adams. So maybe you bring Acosta. He can do a couple of those positions, and maybe you bring him in to close out a game, even though you and I both argue that him and Adams don't really do well. They don't coexist on the same field at the same time. But if Adams gets yellow cards, and he does have a tendency of being emotional at times, which we appreciate, but sometimes it can be used against you. You can get a couple of yellows and he's out for the third game. It would be really silly not to have somebody like Acosta or somebody that can be holding midfield for us in a more meaningful way than Musa or McKennie. So, I don't know that I'm just trying to figure out where we'd be lean. You could go Dest, Anthony Robinson and Dest in a pinch could probably play up high and wingers if they want. It's not like they're not uncomfortable there. So there's areas where I think you could do it. I mean, you got Stephen Turner and Johnson as your goalkeepers. Right now, I've got Dest and Yedlin. I got Robinson and Zimmerman.
Mm-hmm.
I got Anthony Robinson and Scally as my left back. I got Richards in there. I think he'll still be around and in the picture. I don't think Brooks is going to be part of it moving forward, personally, just because of basically how everything's been playing out these last 2 qualifying windows. Adams, Musa, McKennie is in there, right? And then you have then what? You got Pepi. He's going to probably be a part of it. You got Pulisic.
Who's your second striker on a depth chart?
That's so wide.
You could play.
Right
you
now.
could
Pulisic,
go false 9
Reyna.
if you needed to.
You could,
but they haven't traditionally.
Aaronson. You got Weah. So right now, with the players I've mentioned, there's room for one more center back if you want a 2 in every spot. I guess Acosta would be in there, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of all the MLS haters out there. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Who are your fullbacks again? Dest and Robinson, right? And then
Is
Scally going to be your
I have
replacement for
Scally
both
written
sides?
down because he can play both sides, and I think it's really going to be a fight between Yedlin, Scally, Brooks, Reggie Cannon and George Bello, who I got to see play last night for Atlanta United against NYCFC.
Are Shaq Moore out for now?
Yeah, I think Shaq Moore's out.
George Bello's probably out for now.
Yeah, I'd say that. I think Scally's the one that I'm very curious about. But it's because, to your point, there's more versatility with him. He can play both sides and have success.
Yeah,
that's
but
what we've seen in the Bundesliga. We haven't
Yeah.
seen it with the national team yet, so we don't really have an idea. It's a different beast.
Yeah. What's crazy about this is, okay, say you brought in Robinson at left back, Dest at right back, Scally as your backup. You've now still got a lack of experience to call upon in a bind, right? Which is where Yedlin is really playing a key role now.
Right.
But in 12 months from now, are you still lacking experience? Now, maybe you're lacking World Cup experience, but in 12 months, all these players are 12 months better if they're getting games and playing regularly at their clubs, right? Joe Scally has now got a year and a half in the Bundesliga for Gladbach. And so you start to look at it and you go, maybe Yedlin's surplus to requirements on this one, because now you've got a Joe Scally who you trust, not because of his experience in the national team, but because he's good and you can trust him because he's a top level player, which means now you have a free player to move to another position.
Yeah, right.
Which is kind of bizarre to think about freeing that up, because Gregg Berhalter hasn't been calling in a lot of strikers. And when you're building a roster, I usually see the most strikers where you might get that gut instinct of like, hey, let's put this guy in. This match is perfect for this type of player, whether that's, Ricardo Pepi, Jesus Ferreira, or, Josh Sargent or PFOC or Daryl DK or whatever, just not having them in, you start to wonder like, man, we are really lean on that forward position, and not lean, but lean in Gregg's willingness to try players there. But it's a time and place. It's qualifying. You need to get results. But just wanted to get your thoughts on if you go two in every position, or if you'd probably stack somewhere else.
It's a great conversation to have. And to Kai's point, he says that we should bring in Brooks. He's going to be one of the few players that does actually have World Cup experience in our player pool, and that's important. We totally agree. But then we have Alex saying, I don't like Brooks anymore. I mean, I watched him play this past week against Arminia Bielefeld. They switched to a back three. He plays on the left side of the back three. I kind of like him better centrally, but I don't know. We'll see how he continues to play for Florian Hofelt there. They've been playing pretty well since they fired Mark van Bommel, so we'll keep an eye on that. I think Aaron Long is somebody that Gregg Berhalter really loves. You got Mark McKenzie. I think you have Long, McKenzie, Brooks, and Richards all kind of competing for two spots. Right now, I got Robinson and Zimmerman, I think, kind of locked in. I don't know. You got Adams and Costa. I think also when we build a roster, I love this conversation and keep bringing it in. And yes, Morton, I agree with you. Can we see Scally in qualifying before we anoint him? 100%.
I fully agree.
Saying, we were on the same page. Because he has that versatility that Heath is talking about, I do think that adds value to his game. But yes, I want to see him as well. What I think is interesting is when we don't know who's in our group yet. Well, we got to qualify, but let's just, we do the business and we're not too far away from doing that. We qualify. I remember Glenn Meyernick coming up to me in the January camp, and I hadn't even made the team yet. And he's like, I want you to start thinking about the three teams that are already in our group, because we already knew who we had. We played Czech Republic first, we have Italy, and then we have Ghana. And I want you to start thinking about those players and I was like, does this mean I'm on the team? Like, what kind of information are you giving me right now? Because I was super bubble guy. So I just feel like once we know who our opponents are, then I think you have to build your team, because then you have to look at it. Will Busio help us? Because Busio has been playing very well for Venezia, and I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon, but he's not necessarily the same build as somebody else that can maybe do, let's just say Acosta for sake of an example. Czech Republic, dude, they crushed us that game. They're so good.
Just found them. My mom's sitting down this box of all the jerseys, by the way. One of these days, Jimmy, we're going to have to go through and show everyone the shirts we traded for.
It's just going to be the ultimate flex show. Yeah. We're just going to call it the flex hour with Jimmy.
You mean this one against Brazil where I traded with Lucio and it fits like a nightgown on me because he's a giant? Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
Des, can we count like the flex counter today? Because I feel like he's got.
Dude, I've got a huge box of flex in there right now, and I'm so. Last night when I got back into town, I was going through everything that my mom brought, because she's like kind of getting rid of memories of just like cutting ties with certain things, and so she brought me back down the box of all these jerseys. This one's going to go up the next qualifying round. This is a great one.
You know what this means though? Like, she's getting rid of your jerseys. I'm pretty sure that means that your time as golden child has ended. I just want you to understand.
My sister's on Broadway, dude. She's
true.
getting all the closet space for like her gigantic witch outfits in her show. And so I'm excited to really go through these. But one of these days we should talk through that and maybe
who's on the back of that Czech Republic jersey that me and Kevin want to know.
Pulisic.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good player. All right, everybody, just really quick. While Heath is doing that, I want to let everybody know, if you're watching live on YouTube, and I can't emphasize this enough, smash that like button, hit subscribe. We want to hear from you. Turn on your notifications as well. Get in the comments section as you do. Share your thoughts, whatever you want to do. And then if you guys are just listening to this in podcast form, that's nice. You know what's even nicer? Subscribing to the Qué Golazo podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and take a minute to leave us a glowing rating and review. A life hack for everybody. You can do that now while you listen. Yeah, you're welcome. And we want to thank you as well for all the kind words, because we like making free content for you. All right, Heath. So I've kind of got these numbers down.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21. I got 22 players so far. That's 2 in every position. No, I'm missing 1 in midfield. So kind of somebody to back up McKennie in some ways. But you could.
Well, there was actually a comment we had earlier that the biggest thing we need to address before then is a second Tyler Adams. Do you think there's somebody out there right now that could be a second Tyler Adams? I know that we had what's his name at the Colorado Rapids that was with he wasn't even playing much towards the latter part of the season.
Acosta? Are you talking about Acosta?
No, not Acosta. The young guy who's part of the Olympic team. I'm blanking on it now, but just thinking through the pool of players right now, players that we have coming through. Could Yunus Musa ever be a 6? Could McKennie be an ample
James
6?
Sands? James Sands plays there for NYCFC.
That's actually
I got to see him play postage stamp of a field at Yankee Stadium last night. He does well to turn under pressure. He's not going to cover the same amount of ground though. For me, he's kind of got the body of a lumbering center back, but he has the mind and skill to be more of a central midfielder. And I don't always know if that's a great mix per se. So, and I feel like
he's like mid-table Premier League 6. Big, long, can tackle, good with his feet. You know, kind of always has a triangulation, but isn't going to be your cover 90 miles for 90 minutes type of transition player. Yeah,
especially, and this goes back to what I was saying before. Once we know who's in our group, I think we can start to build a roster, maybe tinker with those.
So you're talking about building a roster for the teams we're playing against. I like this. This is a layer deeper.
Well, so then you have, I think your last 3 or 4 spots could be tinkered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about, Busio coming in for whoever else we're considering that spot, maybe De La Torre, Luca De La Torre makes a better sense to make that happen. Or, I think it depends on who we think we're going to match up against and how we want to play. Now, if we know that we're going to have a lot of the ball, I don't have any problem with bringing James Sands. We're talking about versatility. First, James Sands has proven that he can hold his own. He did it in the Gold Cup at center back. So maybe he's our 4th option as a center back, but also deep cover for that holding position. It seems like Gregg has trusted him in both spots. So, I mean, I guess there's still an outside shot for James Sands. But and David agrees with me. Luca De La Torre would be great. He plays as a double pivot for his team. But that goes back to my point, David, is that we don't know who we're going to play against yet. And I think once we have a better idea, and I love that Glenn Meyernick said that to me. He was an assistant for Bruce for the 2006 World Cup, that they're already thinking at that point, 6 months in advance. We know who our teams are. Let's start preparing our teams to start to think in those mindsets of how we're going to go out there and try to have success against these particular teams. We didn't start off very well, but I thought we held our own for the next 2 games. And I think that matters. Now, you're going to have your core guys that are going to play no matter what. Doesn't matter who the opponents are. But maybe those last 3 or 4 spots are determined by our opponents.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's safe to say that, and this sounds bad because I wish no ill will on anybody, but we'll probably have 2 or 3 injuries that have our best roster players. We've seen this. Gio Reyna's been hurt for a period. Christian Pulisic is always sort of around the corner. Tyler Adams, a lot of problems as well. I think it's like back problems that he's had, some things like that, or whatever. There's just a number of players. You're putting on a ton of miles. We're talking about this period of COVID over the last year and a half where they put on a lot more miles than usual. And so it would be unrealistic for Gregg to build his roster for the World Cup today with the players that he has now. You have to be able to go a little bit deeper. And maybe that's why we're seeing 26, 27, because that's the players that are going to be called upon based on who's available in the end. For me, though, when I think about who's not been in yet, and I think about Joe Scally and the team, again, I think about Caden Clark's now going to Leipzig here in the winter. He's got a year to prove himself. I think about Cade Cowell, who's another 18-year-old playing for the San Jose Earthquakes, who's just a man-child who could also play for Mexico potentially. I think about the US U20s and some of those players coming through. I think about the dual nationals that are playing U20s for Mexico as well that could play for the US. And so there's a number of players that could round the corner. And it's more your attacking players that we have, because I'm not seeing a ton of depth right now. Florin Balogun as well, if he were to choose to play for the US. But it seems like it's mostly those attacking players, whereas I'm not seeing, outside of James Sands, a number of players that are or a deep roster of players that are coming through the center back position, that are coming through the sixth position, fullback position. I think we've got decent depth, and we've got our best players that are already young playing at those MLS clubs right now. So I'm just wondering, who do we not have an eye on, and what position is going to surprise us in 12 months time based on who we have available, and then who's also in peak form. Because again, I go back to my own cycle, and it was Edson Buttle, it was Hercules Gomez, who was scoring, and Robbie Finley, who was scoring. These guys are all scoring like mad, like crazy. And Herc was on
he went with the hot hand.
He won the Golden Boot. Yeah, he went with a hot hand. And those players were not part of the qualifying cycle. And if they were, were playing bit part roles. But timing plus opportunity leads to that moment for them to be called in and have some extra depth. That meant Connor Casey didn't make the national team, who was a huge part of qualifying. And so I think about that in the context of, who do you use to kick down the doors now versus the ones that you might rely upon because they're in form come the day of. And it's generally, like I said, more attacking players than the ones that are, because attacking players are streaky, right? You want form players there, or you're comfortable with form players there. You don't want a streaky fullback or a streaky center back, because they need to be a 7, 8, or 9 all the time to be a consistent national team player.
No, before we get to this question by Kai, who says, who do you think that's been involved in qualifying so far but won't make the cut? I guess my obvious answer would be John Anthony Brooks, because it's already kind of looking that way for him. But we can get into that more in a second, because Rob also had a good question about, or a statement essentially, that when we, in 2014 World Cup, sadly the last World Cup we qualified for, we only took Josie Altidore as our 9. And when he got hurt with that hamstring injury, Clint Dempsey had to kind of play that false 9 spot. We had to change our tactics.
No, we took Julian Green as well, and we didn't take
dude.
Landon. We took Julian Green. He was a forward.
Well, I know, yeah, but don't get me all fired up about Julian Green again.
He scored on his first touch in a World Cup.
Yeah, which my eyes couldn't have rolled.
Oh, those hurt. Those hurt a lot. That's the whole context around that was so wild. I don't want to go back to that because I get triggered too. But yeah, what a wild moment that was.
No, but there's a good shout for Christian Kappas, who's over playing for Brøndby, 22-year-old holding midfielder that maybe could be somebody that emerges over the next year, somebody that pops out of nowhere.
But hasn't he been coming off the bench too a lot for Brøndby? Maybe not, but I know that he's a solid player. But
sure, I think he's.
But a year's a long time. We've seen it.
A
year is a long time to be. You can see players really step up over 12 months when they get a little bit of that sniff, or maybe they get a sniff of the national team, or maybe they get interest from a club, or they make a move and you see them. You know, that's the test: is can you go from here to the next level? You can't see what I'm doing with my hands.
Well, what if Ricardo Pepi though all of a sudden can't score? I mean, he had gone through. He obviously was on a hot spell. We brought him in. He scored a bunch of goals early. I'm still on the hype train. I think he does a lot of the intangibles and thankless work that maybe doesn't be seen, or maybe doesn't valued by some of the fan base as it should be, in our humble opinion. That's why we're here to hopefully educate everybody. But if he starts to go through this rut and can't get out of it, which we've seen with plenty of players, do you still stick with him? Do you
He's
go
in
with
a
the
rut.
hot hand?
He's in a rut.
I know,
now.
but do you go with the next cycle? Do you go with the Hercules Gomez's and the Robbie Finleys, who we could argue never even got close to sniffing the national team until they got on a hot run?
Yeah, I mean, Ricardo Pepi is different for me. I don't like Ricardo Pepi. Yes, he has unbelievable potential as a goal scorer, and I think that will shine through in time.
Sure.
But the intangibles that you mentioned, his hold-up play, his predictability, the dirty work that he's willing to do, his first touch, all the things that bring other players into the game, he's been almost perfect for the national team. He very rarely doesn't hold the ball when it comes to him. His first touch very rarely lets him down. We don't have that from now. Look, Pifak can hold up and scrap, but he's not super technical. Daryl DK has good hold-up play, but again, not super technical, but a horse that can run through walls for you and really stretch defenses in a different way. And occupy center backs. Josh Sargent, I think, is probably at the bottom of that chart right now, based on the club that he's at. Even though, congrats to Norwich winning with their new coach Dean Smith. Woo, hooray! Hopefully he starts scoring goals there. But those players are the ones that I'm like, okay, find find a form striker to put behind them. But Ricardo Pepi is one, unless he goes the whole season without scoring and he just looks a completely different player. He's too young, I think, in my book, to lose that edge that he has right now. He's 18. He's going to.
No, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. So
he's definitely not your vote to get cut. I'm going to throw it out to everybody else that is watching live, or if you're listening to this podcast later, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter at Qué Golazo Pod, QUE Golazo with a Z pod on Twitter. Hit me up or Heath at Jimmy Conrad at Heath Pearce. We'd like to hear from you. Who do you think has not necessarily been a significant part, but unless you think that's possible, that will be cut before the World Cup roster is named? That's a tasty one, and we want you guys to let us know. I think John Anthony Brooks seems like the obvious choice at the moment. When I look at the team that we've been relying on,
you're saying in a year from now he won't. Not if the roster was today. You're saying
I'm saying from a year from now. I think he's slowly being pushed out. That's what I think. So we got Adams, Musa, McKinney. I don't have any inside information, by the way. I know you guys come to us because we know some of the players and we have some insight. And sometimes we do. And we try to share that.
If Gregg was telling me who his roster was in a year from now, I'd be like, Gregg, you're insane, man. You're insane. You got to qualify for a World Cup still. You don't know who these players are. You don't know who's going to merge. So if Gregg was telling us, we'd be saying Gregg needs to focus on some other things.
Like, chill out, Gregg. Okay, you got 3 G's. Just chill out. Okay, so I mean, when you look at the Adams, Musa, McKinney, I don't see anybody there. Reyna, Pulisic, Weah, Aaronson, Pepi. Those all seem set. Maybe Reggie Cannon instead of Yedlin. We could potentially see that. Just playing for Boa Vista, I feel like Cannon, even though he made the move to quote unquote Europe, where all rainbows and puppy dogs and all types of things happen for Americans, and they're going to be infinitely better because they change teams. He hasn't necessarily gotten better. He's got some different life experiences, I'm sure, and he's maybe gotten better in different ways. But it's not always a move that I think is a net positive all the time. And then Joe Scally could be another one that we're talking about now, but he hasn't really played, so we don't even know. Sargent needs more seasoning, as Morton says. He looks lost out there. I mean, for me, I don't know who. For me, Brooks is the obvious answer, but yeah. But I would say if we're looking for another number 9, and I go back to Rob's comment about bringing two like out and out number 9s, and I think you have to. When at the World Cup that I played in, flexing again, we had Brian McBride and Brian Ching, and Brian Ching never got off the bench. So they were obviously fortunate that McBride stayed healthy the whole time. But I think it is important that if McBride went down and Chingy wasn't there, then we are throwing like a Landon who's better as like a second striker, or Clint, who that was his first World Cup, or Bees, who was playing midfield still at that time. Yep. To have to make a makeshift lineup. So I think it's important, and I think there's still room for a number 9 to emerge or reemerge, right? Whether it's Sargent or DK or P-Folk. I mean, that's a really interesting position that I don't think we have solidified just yet, especially because we're talking about Pepi being in a bit of a slump, and now he's got some time off because the MLS season is over. Yeah.
A few players just off the bat that I think some people mentioned in here as well. Well, one, there was an argument for Tanner Tessman. He's one that I've always really liked his play. I remember going back to Olympic qualifying when he was on the field. He was one of the only players trying to advance the ball forward. He's got a great range of passing, which I think is great. He can be a deep lying midfielder. Again, I worry about his transition game and his speed a little bit more like a James Sands type. But when he's on the field for Venezia, he's been really good as well. It's kind of few and far between in terms of consistent minutes, in terms of being a starter. A lot will have to change in terms of his game there. And then when I think beyond that, I think about these players that are contributing, right? And those bubble players are Yedlin, that's Leggett, that's a Roldan, that's a Areola, that's a
Hoppy too.
A Hoppy, it's a Jossie Zardes. Now Hoppy in form, Hoppy playing regularly. I like his chances a little bit higher because he's one that you're like, you see what he's like with the hot hand. You see what he's like. He is one of those ones that you're like, oh, this guy thinks he can beat anybody. And if the timing is right in a World Cup game where you're like, oh, like unleash this guy and let him go, that's a good feeling to have, or it's a confident feeling to have if you're a coach calling to the bench on a player like that. So those are the players that, as of right now, I don't think will make the squad regardless of how they will. And they're going to get the same talk that I got, which is like, you were hugely important. Leggett played the most games of anybody, I think, so far under this year or under Gregg Berhalter.
I could see Leggett getting left off.
Yeah.
Which I think would be a bold move because he's really been attached to the hip with Gregg for a long time. I could see he really, just so everybody knows, Gregg Berhalter loves Aaron Long, who's been out with an Achilles injury for the New York Red Bulls. And I actually don't think he was not playing that well prior to getting hurt. I think he lost a little bit of sharpness. Maybe a move to Europe fell through and he just kind of lacked motivation.
Yeah,
but,
like West Ham or Aston Villa or something like that was the
something fell through. And we've been through that before. We're actually witnessing it with Harry Kane now. Like, he didn't get his move to Man City, and he's just going through that. What am I doing with my life? Is this really where I want to be?
Yeah, but he's good with the national team at least. You know, he takes his break and goes and scores goals.
That's true. He probably feels more comfortable there, and you don't have to worry about all the pressure of everything else, even though there's always a lot of pressure on the English national team. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think legit that could be a good shout. You know, somebody who's really been with Gregg throughout and could be left out, and that would be a really hard conversation to have as a coach. But
well, Areola too. Like, if you're Areola, you definitely think that you're a roster player for sure in this team. Like, you definitely think that you're a guy that's going to make
enough.
The squad. You've done enough. Gregg trusts you, and trust is a big thing. I think when you're going into a World Cup, it may be different in terms of having to cut down to 23 and where you expect players to be in 12 months time. We're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds who will all be a year older with the experience that they have. Like Brenden Aaronson, if Tim Weah and Brenden Aaronson are competing for a starting position on the right side, then Areola's out. But if Areola's competing for a starting position 100%. With them, then maybe he's still in, and you've got to make the hard decisions. But you're not leaving Aaronson at home. You're not leaving Tim Weah at home if he's playing for his national team. But then again, like I said, you're looking at 26 players come World Cup time, just like any club team, just like any time. Naturally, at certain points of the season, people break down, whether it's a hamstring tear that's 6 weeks long and you miss the World Cup, or something more substantial. But it's unrealistic to think that the 23 we're saying now will be the 23 that are even available come the World Cup. So, Jimmy, you've got 22 players right now, right?
Yeah, I do. But let me get into this question really quick by Charismatic, because I think it's important. Like, you could see Timothy Weah as the number 9 if Pepi goes down, or if we don't have an option. I'd like to see him there. And I bring up this question because it leads me into which kind of fringe players do we want to see or deserve more of a look in 2022? Because we only have 6 World Cup qualifiers. And then we really just have glorified friendlies until the World Cup starts. Yeah. And is that the best time to evaluate guys? And when do we have to name our team? I don't even know if that's been announced. So there's a lot to unpack here. And we only have 6 more looks to really identify who our best 11 are for the most part, or, you know, maybe our best 9 or 10. And I think we're getting closer to that. I think that's starting to work itself out.
Yep.
And then who are our super subs that we know that we can trust and come in and do the job based on the situation, right? And then, okay, who are the guys that are going to be good locker room guys who might not play, but they're going to be in the 23. We have all these things to look at. So my question to you, Heath, and everybody listening or watching, you can hit us up at any time. Doesn't have to be live. It can be any time. Which fringe players do you want to see more of? I'll raise my hand and see. I want to see Joe Scally.
Yep.
I want to see Chris Richards get more games. And to Charismatic's point, I want to see maybe Timo Weah or other players having a chance at that number 9 spot, because I think that could change the outlook on who we bring. So instead of maybe bringing a Zardes, you know, or somebody who maybe is not in form, you're not just bringing them to bring them in because, hey, well, they're a number 9, but you're actually bringing in players that can help kind of move the whole thing forward. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting to see a couple different players in different looks. Honestly, I'd like to see Sergiño Dest play out on the wing for us, for the national team. He does it for Barcelona. I'm pretty sure he can do it for the U.S. men's national team, and see what that looks like when he has a proper outside back in front of him, or behind him, excuse me, either in Scally or Yedlin or Cannon or whoever it is that we want to try there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, there's going to be, I want Mark McKenzie to get more minutes. I want to see when Aaron Long gets healthy, because he's a favorite of Gregg. I want to see where he is and see how sharp he is. Obviously, you want to give him a shot. It's not his fault he got hurt. So it's I don't know. I'll throw it to you. I mean, who are the fringe players? You want to see anybody out of position to see if we look better as a national team?
Yeah, oddly, James Sands was one that and Will's talking about him now, that I really liked. I don't remember what game it was in the Gold Cup where he didn't look as good. He looked a little shaky in his passing, and I think that was just sort of the end of that. Like, you can't have that much of an off day for the national team in terms of your passing range and ability. And he seemed a little unconfident in his defending.
Was that in Panama?
One game. I can't remember what it.
Did he play in Panama?
I can't remember what it was, but it was.
I'm trying to forget that Panama game.
Yeah, it was some sort of shaky moment that I remember just being like, okay, this could be the one where he falls down the depth chart a little bit. And so far, we've sort of seen that be the case. But when I watch him at times, he just seems that calming presence, which I really like. And when I look at our midfield, by the way, we don't have a lot of calming presence deep in the hole. Tyler Adams, good on the ball, but not a calming presence deep in the hole, right? In terms of like, get it off your center backs under pressure with your back to the field, knowing where the answer is. Actually, the best one that we have is Yunus Musa and his ability to get the ball in deep spaces and solve problems through either passing, dribbling, passing, and moving. He's just got a wide range of ways that even if he's under pressure, he's going to get out of a mess or get out of a certain situation. That really unbalances teams when you have somebody that can do that, right? Because they think that they got you in a spot, and Mexico's technically are always a team that are so good at that, where you feel like you've got them trapped, ding, 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 they're out the other side, and now everybody's sprinting back going, oh man, here they go on a counterattack. And so having that, I think, is really, really good. But, in terms of players I want to see, Joe Scally for sure is number one, because if yes, we know he's a quality player because he plays in the Bundesliga and he's still a teenager and whatever, but you know what it's like, Jimmy. Sometimes it takes years, if ever, that players feel comfortable at the national team level, right? The international game is different. You want to get that experience for him. Obviously, playing in a World Cup is going to be very different than qualifying for Concacaf as well. What the expectations of a player are, the style of play, those types of things are going to be really, really important. David talking about Brian Reynolds as well. He's another one that was a little bit on the depth chart when he was walking around.
I'll say that time. For sure.
Denver.
I mean, we haven't even brought up Conrad de la Fuente either. We have other options. And to Tyler's point, he says, put some respect on Daryl Dike's name. Dude, I don't know how many times you've watched this. We talk about Daryl Dike as glowingly as possible all the time, and we want to see him. So, yes.
Tell Greg that. Tell Greg that. Don't tell us.
Tyler, we're on the same page, dude. We're not trying to disrespect Daryl Dike. I think he's fantastic, and his scoring has been next level. I think he scored 7 goals in his last 8 games to carry Orlando into the playoffs. So I'm excited to see how he plays. But yeah, De La Fuente is not even a name we've mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, it's certainly, and this is my issue, right? Is you start to look at the depth charts of these teams and the versatility, right? And you talked about Dest playing potentially right midfield. Well, what does that mean for Ariella? Probably means that you have enough versatility if you can get Dest a couple of games in the national team, or this guy plays winger for Barcelona. I think I could put him in a bind and he'll probably do all right. But then that means, okay, well, what happens if Dest, because Dest's another player who's fragile, does that now mean that you need to have a Yedlin at right back? And if Joe Scally doesn't work, then who is your depth chart? If you have coverage at right midfield, you don't need Areola anymore. Dest could still play right back, could fill in at right wing in the bind. If you had Brenden Aaronson playing on the left side, there's a number of things when you're putting together a roster that don't all align together, right? It's this domino effect. But the one thing that I want to see more of is more 9 options. I appreciate Greg bringing in Jesus Ferreira. Jesus Ferreira is a false 9. He doesn't play as a 9 for FC Dallas because who does? Ricardo Pepi, the guy who starts on our national team. And so, and I thought Ferreira was pretty good and very active in the short minutes that he played for the national team in this last camp. But I do think we need another number 9 option. If I'm Greg, I'm kicking down the door and telling Faloran Balogun, hey, let's go, man. Let's go.
Right.
Let's make this happen. This is wide open for you. We've got this super young team that are all your age. You are the future of it. You are the present. Let's figure this out. Let's get you into the national team for a few games of importance. But I will say this. Daryl Dike, I think, should be in right now as well.
I would love to see him. Yeah.
There is going to be, and this is my hot take, I don't know who it is, but a player that does not play in a qualifier that will make our World Cup squad. And I'm talking about a player that hasn't been called in. Like, there's still a player between now and the World Cup that is not in the national team picture. When I'm thinking about Ricardo Pepi 6 months ago, not part of the picture. When I think about Brenden Aaronson a year ago, just talking about this scrawny little kid who's got some potential at Philadelphia Union and then just exploding in terms of his development. There is going to be a player. It'd be unrealistic not to think in the next 12 months that a player that's not in the national team now that we may or may not be talking about is going to take a spot from a player that we think is in.
Yeah, I was going to say Aaron Hall. Aaron Hall said Caden Clark and Paxton Aaronson. I mean, the Aaronson, I don't know how many boys the Aaronson family had.
There's 9 more. There's 9 more coming after them.
The team. There's a lot of Aaronson kids out there. Yeah, Paxton, I think, would have to take some pretty big strides to break into the space where we already have a lot of talent.
The one thing I will say, by the way, on Paxton, real quick, and I'll let you talk about Caden.
Yeah,
people say his mentality is the exact same as his brothers. They did this survey at YSC Academy with all the players of like, whose position do you want to take in the first team? And everyone talked about it. I want to be this guy. I want to be that way. And Paxton was the only one that said, I want my brother's position. I want to take his spot in the starting lineup and like push him out of the starting lineup. So he's got that same sort of soccer only mentality. Doesn't have any other hobbies or interests, just plays soccer. So that actually tends to bode well for a player in their development if when they have that type of mentality. But anyways, you're talking about Caden going to Leipzig.
No, I like Caden as well. Caden Clark. He's obviously very talented, and he's making a move to RB Leipzig. So, he could be one that breaks in and finds some space and wins Greg over enough that this player could add value to what we're trying to do and could provide cover. I think the player that you're mentioning won't be a starter, but I think it would be somebody that comes in and fits a very specific niche based on potentially the opponents that we're going up against, where all of a sudden, if you've got a couple, big, tall center backs that are physical, and that might not be Ricardo Pepi's game. Maybe that's where his Daryl Dike comes in and can provide us a little bit more of that hold-up play. Maybe his hold-up play gets tremendous over the next year. Maybe Daryl Dike makes a move in January and all of a sudden takes these bigger strides that I think mesh really well with all the other complementary players that will be providing him service or getting link-up play or whatever it is. It's really interesting, the whole process, and we've had some great suggestions from the chat, so keep it coming in the community. We'd like to hear from everybody else that isn't watching this live. But I think what's very cool, and when we scale back, because I think we all get in and we get really passionate about the team and names and all this stuff. Dude, our player pool is super deep. And it's awesome that we're going to have so many of these options on one hand. And then as you and I that have both lived from being cut, some of the last players for a World Cup, to be on that side of it is heartbreaking. And you sacrifice so much of your life to even have this chance to get a look, and then to have it broken like that is tough, especially when you're at the finish line and you trip ultimately in some ways. So I have 16 names for you here.
Okay.
And I'm curious of players that I think will be going, okay, that have done enough. Obviously, barring injury. You got Stephen, Turner, Johnson. So you have 3 goalkeepers. That means there's 20 spots left.
Are you okay? Wait, you're saying Johnson's the 3 for sure from now?
I'm not saying
he doesn't play.
sure.
He doesn't play in the national team. Good player at the club level, but you've got the
Nick
young
Romano didn't play for the national team either, and he's just a good.
Yeah, but I'm saying, do you want Sean Johnson, who's ultimately reaching the peak of his career, or do you want to bring in the young what's his name, Slonina from Chicago Fire, or another young goalkeeper coming up, where you're like, this could be. And again, I do believe it should be merit based, but at the same time, there is going to be 1 or 2 spots that are places for the future. I think Pele went to his first World Cup and didn't play.
That's true. When I was in 2006, we had Casey Keller, we had Marcus Hanneman, and then Tim Howard was kind of the young guy we were bringing. I mean, he was obviously a known quantity at that point, but he wasn't like. I guess Hanneman was more the third, but that would be a good reason to bring in a younger player. So. Yeah, Timmy was definitely the second there. I got ahead of myself there. But that's a good opportunity. You're right. That's something to think about. But right now I have Sean Johnson in. But okay, if you want to leave it blank, we can leave that one blank. But still, you're going to have 3 goalkeepers. So let's just leave that out.
Okay.
You have 20 field players. I got Destin Yedlin. You feeling okay about those 2?
Yeah. It depends. it depends where you like. This isn't a year from now who we're predicting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where Yedlin's going to be playing next year.
Okay, finish your back line. Okay,
I got Robinson and Zimmerman. I think are going to be fine, assuming they're continuing to. This is all consuming they're going to continue playing. The same. And Horvath is another good shout for the 3rd goalkeeper. Anthony Robinson will be our left back, and then from there, I've got those 5 guys. So I still think there's 3 spots open. You got Adams, Musa, McKennie. Okay, you got Reyna, Aaronson, Pulisic, Weah, and Pepi. Okay. In some ways, I think we have more questions of our back line in terms of depth or potential.
Wait, give me that front 5 again that you said that you just
well, Reyna and Aaronson, I think are going for sure. Pulisic and Weah.
Okay.
And then you have Pepi.
Yeah. Weah is actually the only variable there that I think in 12 months' time, because we've seen him go long periods. Hopefully, he's going to continue to get that much time for Lille, where he's another guy that on confidence when he's fully healthy, he's been very, very good, especially with the national team, but is in a club situation where he hasn't consistently started, and that makes a difference over the next 12 months. And he's one that could be a variable, even though he's in peak form right now and leading this national team. He wasn't a couple months ago, and he might not be in a couple of months, though I do hope he does. And the same thing could be for Aaronson, but Aaronson has shown a little bit more of a consistency in his national team games than I think Weah has when he's given his opportunities.
Yeah, we see a comment here from Vince who says, if Gregg leaves Brooks at home, that's a fireable offense. I feel like there's stuff going on behind the scenes there. I don't really know what it's all about, but it just feels really weird that we would leave our most experienced center back at home for 2 consecutive qualifying windows because he had back spasms the first time. There's more to that. And I think as time goes on, we're going to learn more about what that situation is. But it could just be a trust thing that Gregg really relied on him to show up in the games in the first qualifying window.
I don't think so. It can't be. I think it has to be something more, because it's not it's not like John Anthony Brooks plays at Wolfsburg.
I know he does.
Who are a big club. And even though they went through a rough patch, and he went through a rough patch this season so far, you think
he'd bring him back in? Do you think Brooks will be back in?
I think it's one of those things that he feels like maybe he doesn't. The only thing I could think of, right? And I have 0 bits of information, mostly because I haven't asked or tried to inquire or probe on this.
Yeah, same.
Is that he feels like he's not the leader that he needs a World Cup veteran to be for this young group. Because if you look at it on paper, captain in the Bundesliga, plays every game, World Cup veteran, World Cup qualifying veteran,
Champions League,
yeah. Right age, right position to be a leader of your team, yet somehow a form thing is the reason that you leave him out, or a back spasm, or whatever this is that's bigger. It just seems like there's got to be something more than just a pure form type of thing where he feels like his presence is negative to the team, or that he doesn't respect the crest at the moment, or that his priorities aren't right. We've seen it before where guys need to kind of get their head straight, or don't feel like they're giving everything to the team or putting the team first. We saw that Weston McKennie getting sent home for not putting the team first. I'm not saying I have any idea what it is, but it feels like it has to be something in that vein. Otherwise, you look at it and you go, nah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless there's something bigger where you decided that you don't trust this guy for something beyond just his ability on the field. And maybe that's part of it. And then the other part is like, what are you doing for the team off the field? If I'm not starting you, are you being the right leader that we need? That's a veteran. Yeah,
the Brooks one is interesting. So there's going to be plenty of time for us to dissect that as we get more information, hopefully, about the whole situation. But what I wanted to add was, I think there's going to be room for a Busio or a De La Torre, some player or two that can give us different looks if we want to transition the ball in a different way than I think everybody. Well, from what I understand, everybody I talk to or I read or listen to, everybody's pretty set on McKennie, Musa, and Adams for good reason. I think that's a very solid, well-balanced middle three in our 4-3-3. I think they can provide different things, go box to box, and all that good stuff. That's why we like it. Everybody's on the same page about it. But I think that Busio does give you something a little bit different, and so does De La Torre. I just wonder, my only concern for those two is that it seems like they have more influence when they start a game as opposed to when they come off the bench, because it's harder to find the flow of a game especially when you're a possession guy or when you're good at holding the ball, when the game's already 100 miles an hour, or the flow of the game's almost been dictated and you're trying to win it back by yourself and trying to dictate the terms.
Do you think Aaronson and Weah both have that sort of bench spark or reliability to not be a starter? I think Aaronson does. Do you think Weah is a better starter than I mean, clearly every player is going to say I'm a better starter than a bench player, but do you think that they can come in and play that role? World Cup's also different than like a friendly or, whatever, but certainly that's going to be looked at through a lens too of saying, it should not going to be my starter, but like I need guys that I can call upon that are going to get the task and understand it and then go deliver it. Whether I give them 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 30 minutes.
What's interesting is that when you say to a player, and we've had teammates that have lived this too, hey, you're going to play in a World Cup. So this is how amazing is that? But it might not be as a starter. It might be as 30 minutes. You'd be like, I'll do whatever it takes to play in a World Cup, and I think that you could sell that a little bit. Like, hey, this is kind of how we're seeing you. You might be a spot starter. You might actually get a start based on how things are going. But right now we see you as a guy coming off the bench to really give us that lift. And can I count on you to be that player? And what else are they going to say? Dude, I get to play in a World Cup. That's amazing. I'm one of the first guys off the bench. Dude, you take that 100 out of 100 times. There's not even a question with regard to that. So yes, I think as we play this hypothetical game, is he better coming off the bench? I actually think Timo Weah does better as a starter. I feel like he feels like he gets to help shape the flow. And whereas Brenden Aaronson can be super chaotic and I think disrupt maybe what a team's doing. I also feel like they play a position where it's easier to be a sub in some ways because you can get after some tired back line, or that
might be an argument to not have Weah then, Jimmy, because if you look at Gio Reyna and you look at Christian Pulisic and Pepi, I mean, that's your three so far, unless you move Gio Reyna into the 10 spot, which means maybe you're moving out of Musa or McKennie, because I think Adams is the shoe in there. And then Brenden Aaronson could be your sub if you think that this is a guy that I need to start or not play. Or you actually end up starting him because you're going to have to probably rotate some players. You're not going to start the same 11 for an entire World Cup, no matter how short or long.
No, you can't. You can't do that. No, you can't do that. But I love it. I love talking about this. So everybody that's new here, hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on your notifications so you do not miss an episode of the Qué Golazo podcast. And as a reminder, we're here every Monday live with you guys to talk only about the U.S. men's national team and really get into the weeds about why we love this team and what we think is best for them moving forward. Now, Heath, before we let everybody go, and we did this for an hour, but if you guys want it to be longer, just show us some love on all the platforms. Hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us on podcast form, wherever you get your podcasts. That would go a long way for us to doing this longer and longer for you. And we love having this conversation. Is there any formation change? Or do you think that's going to be dictated by our opponents, or at least should be shaped by who we're going to be facing because we were talking about player selection, but maybe there's a formation that you'd like to see us try ahead of the World Cup, because that's starting in less than a year. We're 364 days away from the World Cup starting.
Yeah, I mean, I would love just to see, and maybe I'm just falling in love with this again because we saw the back three or the back five. We've seen the 4-3-3 for a long time. I would love to see two strikers play for this national team. Nobody plays with two strikers anymore. That's where I think you could say Daryl Dike with Pepi. You could also have another false nine type, because I do think Pepi could play that center role, somebody running the channels off of them. That's a Tim Weah. That's a Jesus Ferreira. That's a number of players that I think could be in addition to this team if you played with two strikers, and something different and dynamic. Anytime that I've seen any teams, and I'm talking mostly about Major League Soccer this year, where I've seen teams play with a two-striker system, or sometimes in Europa League and others, center backs don't like it. Holding midfielders don't like it, because you constantly have players around that you have to decide. And now we see more and more players coming back to get the ball. Center backs can split a single player. Fullbacks are more isolated. There's more numerical advantages happening in the central midfield or in wide areas. But when you play with two center forwards, it just changes the dynamic of the game. It'd be nice to have something that we could go to for 20, 30 minutes to just change things up and see if you can disrupt teams a little bit, that could then pull Timo Weah back out to the wing, or something like some sort of hybrid form. I'd like to see that from a formation change. But outside of that, you know, I've seen enough tinkering from Gregg for a lifetime that I'm just comfortable saying that I've seen it all. What about you? Anything for you?
I would say I like the two strikers. I maybe a bit of a purist and
a traditionalist, old.
Yeah, old school. I just think there's room to try.
You want to see a sweeper and a stopper?
Yeah, I want Franz Beckenbauer to come back.
You want a libero?
Yes, I want a libero. I want one of our. I want to start seeing Miles Robinson pick up the ball and start dancing through midfield and starting to combine Lucio-esque, to tie it back to your jersey from Brazil. I guess I just want us to practice and think through and work on, in a meaningful way, different looks, so that when we do chase a game, or if we do go to it's needed for us to go to two strikers to get back into a game or whatever it may be, we're comfortable with it. We even see it at the highest levels. All of a sudden, a coach will overthink, and I'm looking at you, Pep Guardiola, right? He goes with something that he's trying to outthink the other team, instead of just going with what has worked up until that point and works best for his team. And that Champions League final against Chelsea, when he took out both of his Rodri and Fernandinho to put Gundogan there, hoping that Gundogan would work out, still blows my mind that a guy of that stature and that much experience would still overthink. And that would be okay if you had done that a few times, 4 or 5, 6 times in a season, and the team was familiar with it. But once you take out a couple of key players, I'll save it for that. But I'm just saying that.
No, exactly. I'm saying save it for a finals of a tournament. But Jimmy,
but I want us to work through every situation so that our players are comfortable with it, and the players that are actually playing in those positions are comfortable. And so basically what I'm saying is, I would love for us to try two strikers.
Yeah, I know we're just one day short of a year. Maybe it is the year anniversary heading into the World Cup, and that's why we're talking about this for everybody's reference. But Jimmy, my closing thoughts on that exact thing is, I cannot wait when the U.S. does ultimately qualify for the World Cup for us to be talking about who's our best 11 based on the opponent that we're playing, and the fact that we're going to play on pristine pitches and be able to say our best football against their best football, no other variables, no other things that we have to prep for when you're talking about Concacaf. The conversation we have, Jimmy, all the time in World Cup qualifying is so different than when we play friendlies, or when we're going to play ultimately in a World Cup, where you're going to be on these beautiful manicured lawns, and it's going to be one team against the other, tactics against tactics, but also talent against talent. And there's not going to be all these variables like pitch and referee and weather. Everybody's going to be in this sort of same vein. Obviously, we're towards the end of the year. It'll be probably between 70 and 95 degrees during those matches, hopefully at nighttime. And so I'm really excited about to see this team consistently in a World Cup in a year from now, playing our best players with a year more experience on a pitch that's beautiful, with the experience that they have against another team. And that's all we have to worry about is, are our tactics right? Is our formation right? And let's see these guys run. Those are my closing thoughts on that year out. I can't wait.
And we're going to end it there. I don't think I can top those closing thoughts. So everybody, this has been the U.S. Men's National Team Hour with two of your favorite former U.S. Men's National Team players, Jimmy Conrad and Heath Pearce. And we can't wait to see you next week. Thanks for listening and watching. Make sure you subscribe and like and all that good stuff. And we'll see you soon. Later.